time and time again, and then all of a sudden we read it again and we look at it from a little different light, and we think that, boy, I have never seen that before. Uh, I hadn't experienced like that just recently in studying the material that we were talking about last Sunday. And I'm just using these couple of weeks to try to point out some lessons to all of us that no matter what age we are, that we can still learn that the principles that God has revealed to us in His Word and the examples have so much teaching and so much knowledge in them that we can apply to our lives every day that we live, and it makes us more like what God wants us to be and to be the people that Jesus died for. And we were looking in 2 Samuel last week. We ran out of time when we were talking about this. When David was fleeing for his life, a man by the name of Shimei came out, and I've got to believe that this is one of the lowest points in David's life. A lot of you know Carolyn and Lewis Chaffin and know about the tragedy that happened to them this week. And brethren, if you don't stop and think about folks like that for just a minute, a family is having a birthday party. And by the way, Lewis's brother was one of the first elders of this congregation here, and been connected. Lewis was an elder here for a time, and connected with this congregation almost since its beginning. And they were celebrating Carolyn's 80th birthday, and there was a problem between her son and her son-in-law. And in the space of probably less than 30 seconds, they were celebrating, and outside in the driveway, two people laid dead. One by his own hand and the other by the hand of her son. And can you imagine that? Just the utter heartbreak. I know it's been 1998, so it's been 26 years ago, just the 19th of October, that my brother was murdered on a Monday morning. A bunch of school kids coming up to go find pumpkins in a pumpkin patch, and a man that wanted his office, that he was a state senator, laid in wait for him and shot him right between the eyes. And all that happened just like that. And I just remember how it turned the world of my family upside down, and I can only imagine what it's done to this family. And so it wasn't announced or nothing's been said here, but a lot of you know these folks. And I hope we all remember that family in our prayer, because there are low days in the lives of all of us when things that we weren't expecting to happen. And we just have to deal with them. David is in that place right now. His own son has come and taken the throne from him. And he is fleeing for his life because his son intends to kill him. He intends to have him executed. And it would have been bad enough if it had been some enemy of his that was doing this. But to think that he said of his own flesh and blood, here is one now. And as he's fleeing this Shimei, chapter 16 of 2 Samuel, he walks along the edge like it must be in a high place, and he throws rocks at David and curses him and says all kinds of terrible things to him. And in chapter 16, Abishai wanted to go and kill him because he was so angered that he would do and treat David, the king, like that. But David said, it may be, verse 12, that the Lord will look on my affliction and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing this day. How many times do you and I have, when something bad happens to us, do we have that attitude that maybe God will turn this into something good? Maybe, I know this is terrible what's happening right now, but maybe God will turn this into something good. Can you understand once again why it said that David was a man after God's own heart at his lowest point here, and with a man humiliating him? And the thing that I discovered from this, that David had his mighty men with him. We talked about them last week. And I did a little research on it. There were 37 of them in all. Uriah the Hittite was one of David's mighty men. David didn't treat him too well, did he? But he was one of the mighty men. And in this group of 37 men, it just occurred to me when I read over in chapter 17, a man by the name of Hushai was also a friend of David, and he came out to go with David when he was fleeing for his life, but David asked him to go back. And he said, that the Lord may use you to overcome the advice of Ahithophel. Now, Ahithophel was the wisest man in Israel. He was the oracle of Israel. I mean, he had more insight and more knowledge and common sense than evidently any other person. And David, he was David's advisor, and David was more afraid of him and his advice than he was of Absalom. And so he sent Hushai back, and he said, maybe you can give advice that will overcome his. Now, it didn't even occur to me till I read this all again what Hushai's advice, what it really meant. And I'm going to read it to you. He said, "For," said Hushai, "you know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are enraged in their minds like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. And your father is a man of war and will not camp with the people. Surely by now he is hidden in some pit or in some other place. And it will be when some of them are overthrown at the first, that whoever hears it will say, there is a great slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. And even he who is valiant, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt completely. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are valiant men." I looked up this morning just the exploits of some of these men. Joshua Bashethbath, he was one of the mighty men. He killed 800 in battle by himself with a spear. That's one man. Here's another one. Eleazar, when everybody else had fled the battlefield, he killed 300 Philistines until his hand was welded to the sword. He couldn't even release it. It was just like it had become part of his body. He killed 300 Philistines. Here's another one. Killed a lion in a pit and met an outstanding Egyptian soldier and killed him with his own spear or sword. These things, you think that these things are just unbelievable. These are, I don't know, but they're in the Scripture. That's what these mean. These were 3 out of 37. And sometimes it gave to me a little different interpretation when he said he has those mighty men with him. The people knew about what these men had done. They knew who these men were. They were outstanding people as far as people knowing them and knowing who they were and what they'd done. And I'll tell you what, it would probably make you think twice to think, because he painted a picture for them that was real. You know what a warrior your father is. You know what these men that are with him, what they have done. And it caused Absalom to listen to his advice, which was bad advice, because they could have easily gone that night, taken the army, and they could have killed David. But he decided to wait. We'll wait for a little while for a better time. Because that's what Hushai told him. This is not the time. What his advice, what Ahithophel's advice was to go tonight. Go tonight, get him, kill him. He decided to wait. And as I read this again, and here Shimei his life is hanging by a thread now, because all David has to do is tell Abishai here, go ahead and kill him, and he would have been a dead man, but he didn't. And then the real lesson of this, though, is over in chapter 19. You know, we've just had a national election here that the results have really changed the face of where our government is heading, because there are 2 opposing points of view, and a new point of view, a different point of view now is in office. And the man who was elected is a man that's, in my opinion, has been persecuted. Anytime any party uses the government, the power of the government and the power especially of the Justice Department, it's not right. Now, David has been removed from the throne, but now he's come back. It's almost like he's been reelected, and he's come back, and one of the men, Shimei, a ferry boat brings him across the river of the king's household. Now Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king when he had crossed the Jordan. Now here's the man that in the too distant past had cursed at David and thrown rocks at him and said terrible things about him, accused him of all kinds of terrible things. Now David is back as king, and he's got all the army of Israel around him, and everything, he's got all of them to his back. And here's the man that did all of that, that's laying on the ground there in front of him. And he says to David, Then he said to the king, do not let my lord impute iniquity to me, or remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my lord the king left Jerusalem, that the king should take it to heart. Does that remind you of anybody that's in the same situation as he was, laying on his face on the ground, pleading for mercy and asking for mercy and for grace? Isn't that the place that we find ourselves in on a daily basis? That we fall short. We don't please our God. We're occupied with everything but what we've been commanded to do. Oh, we're good people sometimes. And we're kind people sometimes. And we're merciful people when it's convenient. Here's a man that, what would you have done if it had been, you had been David? Turn that picture around and let's put one of us, somebody that has, done terrible things to us. And it wasn't just what he said, but the total lack of regard and respect for David, that he would do such a thing in public and say all the things and then throw rocks at him like he was a dog. Now, do you think David had justification to execute him? Well, I think yes, he had the justification. Well, what does he do? For I, your servant, know that I have sinned. Therefore, here am I, the first to come today of all the house of Joseph, go down to meet my lord the king. But Abishai, that's the mighty man that wanted to lift his head off of his shoulders, when he did this, said, shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? That's true. And he should have. Really, he should have been put to death for what he did. He deserved it. And David said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should be adversaries to me today? Shall any man be put to death today in Israel? For do I not know that today I am king over Israel? Therefore the king said to Shimei, you shall not die. And the king swore to him. What did he have on him? Mercy and grace. The two things that you and I cannot do without. Brethren, I'm going to tell you something. We cannot do without the mercy and the grace of God. Mercy, God doesn't give us what we deserve, and grace, God gives us what we don't deserve. We can't do without it. We can't make it out of this world without it. So, what does it make it dependent on us that we do? That we extend mercy and grace. Did Shimei deserve that? No, he didn't. He deserved anything that David would want to have done to him. But you know, that's what mercy and grace is about. God gives it to us, and we don't deserve it. You know, somehow in the distant past, many of us have, through some poor teaching or maybe just some poor learning. Just don't blame everything on what somebody taught us. we had a responsibility to learn. That we thought that when we became Christians, we made a deal with God and we would come to so many services and give so many dollars and make so many visits. And then when we came to the end of this life, God would have no choice but to save us because we'd earned it. We'd worked it out. We'd been there. We'd given our part. As we say, we do our best and then we depend on God to take care of the rest. I don't know who came up with that, but that's about as wrong as it could be. You know, there is a song that we occasionally sing, Jesus paid it all. Well, you know, I do the best I can in the Lord. Jesus paid it all. There is no part of our salvation that we can claim that because I did this and this and this that we earned. You know, in the book of Galatians, Paul does about as great a job as can possibly be done to try to explain to them who were trying to be justified by the law of Moses. We are saved by grace through faith, that not of ourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. And because of that, brethren, we ought to be motivated to do every possible thing that we can to please God, to serve others so that they can enjoy the mercy and the grace of God. And I think about David here. God had extended his grace to him, that he had restored him to his place in the kingdom. And so he extended grace and mercy to one who didn't deserve it. You think, well, he should have gone ahead and had his head chopped off. I think about different times in my life that people have asked me to show mercy about something or another in a work relation where they did something they weren't supposed to do. And I've had a number of people that have worked for me that were in management positions that had a hard time understanding my philosophy about hiring people. I had one who had an ironclad rule that if anybody ever left for any reason, they could never be eligible to be hired back. Anybody else work for a company like that? If you left for any reason, you worked, that was just their policy. He'd work for a company that was their policy. If you leave or you're terminated or whatever happens, if you leave, you cannot come back. The door is shut permanently. Well, I've got people that have worked for me up to 4 and 5 times, and I take them back. And I've had 2 or 3 people that were managers for me that one that he was just irate about it. He said, this is a bad policy. If somebody quits or they leave, they're gone. You should never take them back, because that's what he'd been trained in his previous employment. If they leave, they're gone. They're dead. You don't take them back. You don't take dead people back. They're dead to you. And he was that firm about it. And Then you looked around, there people that had been worked there 2 or 3 different times, and, and they were, and I'd take them back. He violently disagreed with me about that. Had a guy that stole from me, and I caught him. And I took him back. I've had any number of people that quit, give no notice. I mean, just they're there one day and they're gone the next day. I took them back. It's not accommodation to me. Maybe that's a weakness on my part. I'm sure it is. But you know something? If they're employee that's worth anything at all, and I have done this since I've been hiring and firing people, and I've never fired more than probably a dozen people I've been working now about 60-something years, 68 years I've been working. And, you know, I think one reason why that I feel like that is because I have been extended so much grace in my life. I have been in the places some other folks have been, and I have needed help, and people have helped me. And I have tried not to forget that, because you may be up today, but I'm going to tell you something. I think of Carolyn and Louis Chaff having a celebration of a birthday. Carolyn's a year younger than me. And in the space of less than half a minute, your whole world just implodes on top of you. Something that you couldn't even imagine happening. You're dealing with it. They've got 2 funerals now, one today and one tomorrow. They've got to deal with all the entanglements that all this has caused. And none of us know when we may be thrust into a situation like that. And we're going to need all the help and all the grace and all the mercy and all the kindness that we can get, because we can't make it without it. And I feel like that's exactly why David said, nobody's going to die today. I was dead and now I'm back alive. I have been restored myself. So I have to extend to others what has been extended to me. And he did this not only for Shimei, but Mephibosheth. He thought Mephibosheth had betrayed him and had forsaken him because Ziba had lied to him. And he brought Mephibosheth back. When you read that passage, David was a man after God's own heart. Think about these instances right here, about the mercy that he had on others who didn't deserve it, and about the kindness that he showed toward people who didn't deserve it. And I think about all the problems that it caused David, because he kept bringing Absalom and taking Absalom back and forgiving him. And his own soldiers, his own men that were in charge of his army, but Joab, oh, he was so angry at David because David mourned that son. And he said some terrible things to David. Joab is the one that killed Abner, you remember, one of David's closest friends. And Joab is the one that executed David's son, Absalom, when his head was lodged in the tree. You know, the older we get, the more forgiving and the more gracious that we ought to become. Because let's look back over our lives. How many kindnesses have been done in each one of our lives? Things that people have done for us. Things that we've done wrong that we've been forgiven for. Mistakes that we've made that people have forgiven and they've worked around them, and we're here this morning able to come and to worship and to thank God and to honor his son and be able to walk out and say, hey, I'm a Christian. And you know, last Sunday I was telling you about having some chest pains. Well, I found out this week why I was having them. They took me into the hospital Wednesday and had a blockage. It's a small one, only 85%. And it was in a good place. It was the main artery of my heart. And that's why I was having chest pains. Boy, that thing, you wouldn't think a little thing like a clot like that would cause you that much aching and much pain, but it did. And now they've had put me on a blood thinner that I've never been on before. Anybody here take Brill, look like Brillopad, Brillana? You take that? Yeah. Not yet, but you're going? I'll tell you what, I'm probably going to have to too, but they said I'd have to take it for at least a year. But had a clot there, is 85% blocked, and that's what was causing my chest pains. And I think my doctor hadn't insisted on going in there and finding out what it was. I could have been in a serious situation. But you know, the grace and the mercy and the love and the kindness, read Ephesians chapter 2 there. Paul uses all those words to tell us about what a wonderful blessing that has been poured out on us, that God takes care of us. And if we're a Christian, it's one way or the other. If we live, we're fine. If we don't live, we're fine. And brethren, I'll tell you what, I believe that as children of God, we ought to approach every day like that if I make it through the day, that's fine. If I don't make it through the day, that's still fine. The idea that we have made heaven a place that we don't want to go there, we're not anxious to go there because you have to die to get there, is not a biblical thought. And we are so enamored with this world that the thought of leaving it is just terrifying to us. We need to rethink that. We need to restudy what the Bible teaches about the next world and about the things that God has prepared for us. And about why Paul said is to live is Christ, but to die is gain. Because that's the ultimate reason that we're here. Anybody got a question or a thought on what we've studied about David and some of these other things that are just little, maybe little lessons within lessons that We didn't get started till 10:30, so if we need to take some extra time, we'll do it. If anybody, James, did you find out what a detachment was?
No, I'm sorry.
I'll tell you, I'll give him one job to do.
I do have a point. In all of this political mess that we've been enduring for the last, well, since the 2024 election started, which was November, whatever it was, 2020, for the 4 years we've been doing it. It's been said that our president-elect is going to come at with retribution and with the DOJ and all this, put all these people in. But we go back to 2016 when his political opponent had been charged with several things, and I mean, even the term locker up, locker, etc. He didn't do that. For the betterment of the country, for the healing of the nation, he said, let's just move on. He didn't send, the Justice Department after her. We need to be more like that.
I'll tell you, our media in this country, for the sake of everybody, needs to change what they're doing, because there's so much hate and malicious things that are said that are not even close to being true. And I think every news outlet, if they would just hold themselves to reporting what happened, what we used to call the news, like the Walter Cronkite days. When you turned the news on at night, they told you what had happened. They didn't give you all these threats about, well, because this happened, this and this and this is going to happen. I heard, I had to turn the television off. I guess it was maybe Friday night, Thursday night. I can't even remember. One of those two nights when I was recuperating a little bit, because it was upsetting me. You know what they were talking about? That the new administration is going to use the military. They're going to go into houses. They're going to start. Then people ought to be afraid, and just all this fear that they are spreading about. And the only people that I know of that have been talked about being removed from this country are ones that are not supposed to be here. Not supposed to be here, and that we know that thousands of them are criminals, murderers, rapists, and they should never have been here to start with. Does anybody in the world disagree with that? Why would we want to let those people come into our country? Yes, sir?
I think that the people that are here, the illegal immigrants, are just like all the rest of us. I don't think there's more of them that's murderers or more of them that's this. You look at any group of people and you could look at white Christian men and you could say, well, that guy over there, he killed somebody over there. And all of a sudden all white men are murderers. We go kill somebody right over there.
Well,
Every side
Paul,
side of the story that they want to tell.
that's a good point. It is there. We're being told what the media or whatever the people that control the media. But I'm saying this: look in Europe right now. Just read a little bit about what's going on over there. They've allowed mass immigration into Germany. Now they're paying a price for it because they don't know what to do with these people who are not citizens, who legally are not supposed to work, that are involved in all kinds of crime because they're stealing, because they're not working, and doing a lot of other things besides that. Now they're trying to get those people out of their country, and they've created a monster that they don't know what to do with. And that's happening all over Europe. So let's look and see and learn a lesson from what's happening to other countries when they allow hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people to swarm in and they don't know who they are.
When I was in Europe, I didn't see any Hispanics, and I didn't see any Hispanics working because there was none there. system or any way to get those people working. Those people were sleeping underneath the bridge and they were trying to sell little knick-knacky things on the streets and trying to pickpocket you or whatever they could do just to survive. And that's what I saw when I was there.
Well, you're not going to see many Hispanics in Europe. You're going to see people from Asia and from the other countries. That's where they're coming from. They're not getting Hispanics there. You realize we've had over 200,000 Chinese that are military age that have come into our country. Now, how does that happen?
That's a different side of the story.
Yeah, that is a different side of the story.
When most people talk about immigrants, they're talking about the Hispanics.
Well, I'm not. They have been only a part of the people that have come in. It's not the Hispanics. We've had people from, what is it, 150 nations have come, huh? That have come across our border, and from their own records, 13,000 of them were people that were murderers, rapists, and should have been in prison. In fact, that's probably where they came from. They let them out of their prisons and sent them here. That happened. Castro did that in the Cuban situation. He emptied out the asylums and the prisons and sent them all to the United States. We're running out of time. Paul, you're always right on the spot. Sometimes it's the wrong one, but you're on it. Thank you, brethren, for opportunity to be here today, and let's be dismissed in prayer. Our Father in heaven, thank you so much for all the knowledge that is in your word and the principles that you've given us to live by and to shape our lives by. And Lord, heal our country. Help everyone that has a position of authority to do things in a way that you would be pleased with, and that we could live a peaceful and a quiet life. Bless the Chaffin family and the day that they're going through with. In Jesus' name, amen.